Hey everybody, today I'm going to be telling the story of how I went from touching the backboard to windmilling at 5'11" with a standing reach of 7'8.5", which is about an inch higher than Isaiah Thomas's reach. So I started off by picking up some jump programs, as one does, and I read some books about strength and conditioning. Around this time I had a physio who had a background in sports performance, and he showed me how to write some programming, so I worked on that stuff for the next couple of months. My number one goal at the time was touching the rim, and eventually I got it. After that, I kept learning more about strength and conditioning and worked on some basic barbell movements, and I got my first rim grab off of 2 feet, but I was training in the direction of being a 1-foot jumper for my first dunk, so I was kind of a hybrid at the time, and eventually I got my first dunk as well. Around that time, I also made the decision to shift my focus from playing basketball to solely dunking, and the next step for me was going to be windmilling. So going forward, I decided to organize my training into a 3-month mesocycle of triphasic training. If you're not sure what triphasic is, it's basically the idea of categorizing your training into different blocks focused on different types of muscle contractions to isolate certain qualities, which in hindsight is a little bit rudimentary. I think triphasic principles should definitely be applied to training, but probably not as the primary periodization model in most cases. But anyways, I worked those blocks. The isometric block in particular was extremely challenging, but I made it through and built up some momentum heading into the concentric block. And there I was doing a vertical power and horizontal power circuit. And by the end of the training, I was able to windmill on 9-9. And then I decided it was time to windmill on 10 feet, and it was not time to windmill on 10 feet. I actually ended up having a really poor session. I even got called out to do a 2-hand dunk and missed that. So I was pretty upset, but I definitely locked in for the next month of training. Kind of continuing with a peaking style training. You can see here I'm doing sprints, sled pushes, and then I cycled back in heavy barbell back squats because I thought I could get a foreign stimulus out of it. And I also hit multiple 36-hour water fasts to get leaner, and I was pretty fatigued by the end of the training. Once I was able to recover though, I PR'd 9-10. So after that, I headed back in to try on 10, and I missed. But I actually came away from the session with a pretty positive feeling, and I just got on to the next month's training. I hit 405 in my deadlift. I was doing 2 days, 5 days a week, so extremely high volume. I just wanted to test it out, and eventually I hit 911. So I headed back in for another set of attempts on 10, and I was getting close, but not quite. So it was another month of training for me. At this point, I took a step back from my training and realized that I've been peaking for 3 months. I think it's important to not tie yourself to kind of a singular standard of success. And I was becoming so focused on windmilling that I was neglecting other parts of my training, like general development as a dunker and enjoyment. Next few months, I put a big focus on learning new dunks, and I reloaded with a training style loosely based off of triphasic, and I took the time to rebuild my base as an athlete. Going along with this theme, I started putting a bigger emphasis on making my training and the training I write more fun. In the past, I'd written some very effective programming, but I was never really focused on making the sessions fun. And I think coaches really have to realize the importance of that, not only from, an athlete compliance and retention standpoint, but also from a biological standpoint and a practical standpoint in terms of how that influences session flow. But anyways, training was going well, and I decided to go in for another set of attempts. This first and second session didn't work out, but I ended up having another opportunity to go and dunk with Jordan Kilgannon over in Vancouver. Jordan is arguably the greatest dunker of all time and also a super cool dude. It was a great experience in general. I have a whole video dedicated to it, but in terms of the windmill, I was unsuccessful, and it just rolled in, but nothing I would count. So it was another month of training for me. I actually decided to program pause 6x3s for front squat, deadlifts, and zerkers, and it was really hard. A big focus for me in this period of training as well was my general health and taking care of any little issues I might have, and after that, I headed in for another set of attempts. And it still wasn't time. Focus for the next block of training was still general development as a dunker. You can see an East Bay double up there, double up X, 360 lost and found, and a ton of stuff like that. For the next month of training, I experimented with a kind of high-low inspired style of training, so a little bit lower volume, and I was doing kind of concentric focused work. really focusing on the outputs. And I also did some ground interaction work on my off days, some ball skills, and proprioception. Got a solid windmill here on 9-10, and then I headed in for some attempts. And the ball was halfway in the rim, but c'est la vie. I had to go in for another month of training. Here, I hit a 345 back squat, so I cycled those in again, and honestly, just focused on enjoying the next month of movement in general, trying to learn how to fall in different ways, flip, and playing a little bit of basketball as well. And I was still locked in with all of my dunking work as much as I could be, but anyways, the end of the month rolled around, and it was that time again to try and windmill. I got close in this first session, and a couple of days later, I decided to take a 2-hour trip to this court a little bit out of my way. But when I got there, it was wet, and the forecast did not portray that it was going to be wet, and I just couldn't get a solid grip on the court, and I ended up having to leave without windmilling. And it was just generally pretty discouraging. Obviously, you can tell I've been trying here for a really long time, and just nothing seems to be working out. But on the way home, the only thing I could think about was just windmilling. I just couldn't get it out of my mind, and I made the decision to head back to the court. I wasn't sure if it was going to be dry. The sun was out, but it had been like that before. I got there and it was dry. I was able to get my prep in, and everything came together, and I windmilled.